Where do things go from here, to the very question that Eunice was just asking? Joining me to talk about that now are Derek Scissors, the Asia economist at the American Enterprise Institute, and Bill Bishop, who is publisher of the Sinocism newsletter. Really great to have you both here. Bill, I'll start with you on what's happening or not happening on the ground in Hong Kong. And do you anticipate these protests to reach another fever pitch, or is there a sense that it's becoming futile?
Great question. I'm not in Hong Kong, so I can't say with any certainty. I think, though, that this move by Beijing really is the death knell for Hong Kong as we know it, and so I would certainly expect that a lot of the protesters, a lot of the folks who were protesting before the pandemic hit and the restrictions came into place, will want to take to the streets again if they're able to, because what else do they have to lose at this point?
Well, Derek, I guess that's the question, and there are a lot of investors thinking about the future of Hong Kong, whether it loses its special status. The Hong Kong dollar and some sort of futures markets is showing a lot of weakness. If people pull capital out because it's just another part of China, then how existential a threat is that for Hong Kong? And frankly, why should the American public care?
Two important questions. I think it is, I agree with Bill, it's an existential threat for Hong Kong. The question is whether it's quick or slow. If the National People's Congress does approve this proposal, and it almost always does, approves central government proposals, you could have Ministry of State security agents pulling Hong Kong protesters out of their homes in 10 days. That's not an exaggeration. And so I think when the safety of protesters is in question, when Hong Kong becomes just another place where there's no rule of law, you're going to get investors saying, well, why should I locate here? I'm not protected in any way. I'll either continue to do my business through Shanghai or I'll do less business with China. As for why Americans should care, I have a lot of reasons, obviously. We should be standing up for human rights. Senator McConnell, for one, has been a long defender of Hong Kong. He has to care about this latest proposal. I would also say, and I don't mean to be too alarmist, but I think this is true, this is a step by China to say to Taiwan, you know, that whole one country, two systems offer we were making you, it's not real. You're not going to protect your civil liberties, which means reunification between China and Taiwan is more likely to be violent than it was 2 days ago. And that is something all Americans should care about.
And China has even dropped the peaceful language in reference to the situation in Taiwan, whose leadership has just been reelected. Of course, they've struck a sort of more vigorous stance against the Chinese Communist Party. So, you know, I can think there's some implications for investors. Often, Derek, when this tension flares, they say, oh, buy the defense stocks, you know, look to us having to maybe bolster Taiwan's independence. I mean, this is about so much more than that. You also raise the issue of human rights. You know, there are many, look at Syria, look at, Russia, many other countries where there are civil rights abuses that we don't always stand up for. And should it be up to us, or should it be up to somebody like the UN to step in here?
Well, I think the UN's not going to do anything of any value. There's a bigger challenge. The Senate, the Congress passed a bill. President Trump signed it in November trying to protect Hong Kong. That bill has been ignored. So if we thought it was valuable then, and the Chinese are going farther to repress Hong Kong, it calls for U.S. action now. I certainly agree that there are broader implications than just, this is a good time to buy defense stocks. As you know very well, as everyone knows, there's a lot of broad tension in the U.S.-China relationship. It's been holding on in my opinion, by the virtue of the Phase 1 deal. This is more pressure to get President Trump to say this deal isn't worth it anymore. And if he were to do that, you could have a wide variety of American action against China.
I want to come back to what that would look like. But, Bill, I also like to talk through some of the other measures that are going on here. You know, there's this bill for the forced delisting of Chinese stocks that sounds like it could have some traction. It was proposed, I believe, by the Republican Senate, but the Democratic House looks like it would back it. It could become law within a matter of days. China has kind of hinted at retaliation if stuff like that moves forward. Whether it's that bill, whether it's revoking Hong Kong's special status, what steps do you expect they might take if we start to go down those paths?
Well, first on that bill, I mean, it's absurd that China would threaten retaliation, because right now their companies are enjoying a whole separate set of rules. And so all that bill is doing is asking Chinese companies to play by the rules everyone else plays by. And so it's a perfectly reasonable bill. It's been an issue that's been, out for years, and previous leadership didn't want to take China on. So China really has nothing constructive or credible to criticize over that bill. In terms of what steps they may take, they've threatened last year to launch this, I think they call it the unreliable entity list, where they would list companies and individuals that were unreliable or did things to hurt China. Some of their mouthpieces have been threatening that again over the last couple of weeks or so. And, I think, though, they're kind of stuck because if they go too hard against, say, a U.S. business person or U.S. corporations in China, that's going to really hurt their what they see as an imperative, which is to make the country to suck in more foreign capital and keep foreign companies there to stave off decoupling and to get as much money into their economy as they can. And so, what kind of measures could they really take that are quite painful? As Derek was saying, if they think if the sort of the last threads of the relationship have fallen apart and the bottom really has fallen out, then I think you could see some pretty nasty moves against some companies. But until we get there, in some ways, going after, say, a big U.S. company like Apple would actually probably hurt China as much as it would hurt Apple.
Such a great point. And Derek, it makes me wonder why I don't know if this quite rises to belligerence, but certainly in the case of Hong Kong, it does. What does China think it has to gain here?
Well, I mean, this is a really important point. The Hong Kong protests went on for a long time, and there were no mirror protests in China. This is not a threat to the party. This is just an embarrassment to Xi Jinping, and it's a significant embarrassment. But what we're hearing from the Chinese is we don't need a threat to the party in order to go back on our word, to go back on agreements signed by previous party secretaries, endorsed by Deng Xiaoping. This is political dissent is intolerable in China, and that is worth risking U.S. trade relationships and global condemnation, and of course harm to the people of Hong Kong. So I think what we're getting, Xi Jinping wants to send this message: no, you can't even embarrass me. Forget threat to party rule, because there isn't one. No dissent is tolerable, and that's worth the cost. He is projecting quite well a very tough image.
Interesting. Thank you both today. Yeah, Bill, did you want to quickly say something?
I just want to say to Derek's point is excellent, but also I think what Xi's also saying is, what are you going to do about it? I can act with impunity. And, the fact that if there's no response from the U.S., there's no response from the EU, he's right.
Yeah, exactly. It echoes, the silence echoes. It kind of goes back to what Joe Biden was saying. Bill Bishop, Derek Scissors, thanks for your analysis today.